Hi everyone, hope you're all well out there. I'm going to be speaking to you today about the Cancer solstice. As you know, 4 times a year the sun enters a new what is called cardinal sign, and those cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn. And these are very important points in the tropical zodiac, as I say, and they were very important moments for ancient peoples who always used to hold ceremonies around that time, usually the day before, when all of the Earth's energy lines were coming into harmony. But as we know from Rory Duff's wonderful work, the geobiologist, that what are called the harmony times of all the Earth's energy lines coming into harmony are extending and extending year by year. So the Earth is most certainly going through a huge upgrade right now that we're well aware of, I think. So I'm going to be speaking to you today about the Capricorn solstice. Later this week, I'm going to be filming the next update for the full moon in Capricorn, which happens just a couple of days after this solstice. But I think this is a particularly important one and a very unusual one in many ways, because we, of course, are in very unusual times. So without more ado, I'm going to share the chart with you and talk you through it. There's quite a lot to say. So hopefully you can all see this. As always, I set this for England, where I live. Universal time, this happens at 20:53, but on the clock, as it were, because we're in British summertime, that's 21:53. So it's happening Pacific time at 1:53 p.m. So as always, ignore the clock face, ignore the houses unless you live in England. We're just going to look at the planetary positions and their aspects to each other. And I'm going to be talking about something new in this as well today. So, as always, the sun enters Cancer at this time. That's what defines the Cancer solstice. And so this is an annual event. And we know personally, if we have strong Cancer emphasis in our charts, it's about being very emotionally sensitive, wanting to care for others. It's a very mothering energy, needing to be nurtured ourselves, but also instinctively knowing what other people need to feel nurtured. There's a strong need to find a sanctuary, to feel safe and secure, come back to the home, withdraw from the world. And so that's very strong here. Venus is very comfortable in Cancer. So there's a real love of the home as well, and a lot of emotional sensitivity in how we communicate. So that's very much the Cancer side, but as I say, that's repeating annually, of course. Now, we do have a very helpful sextile between Mercury and Taurus. And this is suggesting that the mind is quick here, Mars, but it's also practical. So this is about finding practical solutions that are home-based, that could be around food growing and anything to make us feel very safe and secure, or help those feelings of safety and security. I've talked quite often about, if you don't have a garden or very little space, always think about growing microgreens. It's incredibly inexpensive to set up. You just need a sprouter, and you can you can either just do it from dried lentils and chickpeas and that kind of thing, or you can even get sprouting kits with all of the beans and lentils and chickpeas and broccoli, and etc. And it takes about 3 days. You just have to spray twice a day with water, and you then have incredibly nutritious, fresh microgreens. So please do think about that, because it's such whatever's happening in the world, that's such an easy, inexpensive way to grow incredibly nutritious food. It's also fun for children, that kind of thing too. Now, the moon is in Sagittarius. So this is very interesting. The moon is in Sagittarius. And Sagittarius generally is a sign that gives us optimism and hope. It's very important that we find meaning in what is unfolding in these times, because I actually think from this second half of June onwards, this is marking a step change in the energy for the rest of 2024. It's a step change in our personal transformations and in what is unfolding on the earth. And I see this as a pivot point of accelerated collapse of the old order, at the same time as an accelerated episode in evolution for humanity. Both are happening at the same time. We don't have to wait for the collapse to start the personal transformation. As many of you know, that's already happening. Both are simultaneous, and it simply depends on where you put your focus as to what you are experiencing most strongly. If you put your focus on fear, if you're watching the nightly news, you will be seeing an awful lot of drama, color, fearful events unfolding. And if you make that your point of focus, that will be predominantly your reality. However, if you switch off the news and you focus on loving connections with other people of like mind and building a new earth, you will have a very different day-to-day reality. I've talked about that many, many times, so I'm sure you're familiar with me banging on about those things. But Sagittarius is also linked to travel, and there could be a strong need to an urge to travel. It's also an urge, it's really an urge to go beyond what is, an urge to go beyond what is. And certainly the Sun square to Neptune here is suggesting escapism as well. But because of these quindichiles, 165 degrees, you have to use a very tight 2-degree orb for 165-degree aspect. It's spelt quindecile. Noel Till, my tutor, always used to pronounce it quindicile. These are aspects of upheaval or upset in some way. And so just as Pluto in Aquarius can signal some crisis around aviation, in order that we upgrade hugely in our air travel as we move forwards, I think this quindicile between the Sun and the Moon in Sagittarius also suggests that. Some upheaval or change happening in travel, because Sagittarius to do with flight, so we're very much principally looking at air travel here. But this urge to go beyond, this urge to travel to somewhere idyllic, Neptune is very strong. I know I'm certainly feeling that myself at the moment. But this kind of pincer movement we have, it's very interesting that at this Cancer solstice, the moon, which is in a very strong place, I'll talk more about that in a moment, at 15 degrees of Sagittarius, is forming a kind of pincer movement of two quindiciles between the Sun at 0 of Cancer and Sedna at 0 of Gemini. As I say, you have to use a very tight 2-degree orb for these. And this is really highlighting this human transformation and metamorphosis that we're going through. And I think there are also strong connections to the galactic beings and greater galactic connection. And I'm going to come on to that. So, firstly, just to say, one of the reasons this moon in Sagittarius is so important is that, firstly, it's conjunct the US ascendant for that chart for the US that most astrologers use, 4th of July, 1776, 10 past 5 in the afternoon, Philadelphia, Declaration of the Signing of Independence. The ascendant for the US in that chart is at 12 degrees of Sagittarius. So the moon in this Cancer solstice chart, remember, the US is also a Cancer country, it has its sun in Cancer, is again putting the US in the crosswires, if you like, for these next 3 months. Remember, solstices and equinoxes form the backdrop, the first layer of paint on the canvas for the next 3 months. It's like striking a tuning fork. It's a tone, it's a zeitgeist for the next 3 months. So again, it's bringing the US into prominence. Remember also, I've mentioned that as we move to the end of June and into July, transiting Jupiter will conjunct the Uranus in the US chart. Uranus in that US chart, 4th of July 1776, is at 8 degrees of Gemini. Jupiter will come to conjunct it, and the Uranus in that US chart rules the third house about communication and the media. So that does suggest some truth, illumination, shock, surprises coming to light around any important communication that has happened in the US and around how the media operates. I think that's very interesting because it's feeding into other themes here. The other thing to say, which is very important about this moon, is it's very tightly conjunct something called the Great Attractor, which I've mentioned in the past. Now, the real expert on the Great Attractor is a wonderful astrologer researcher called Philip Sedgwick. I will put his website details below so you can go and investigate for yourself. But the Great Attractor is way, way, way out in space, and it's an incredibly powerful, mysterious gravitational anomaly. It sucks thousands of galaxies in its wake like a giant cosmic vacuum cleaner at 600 kilometers a second, including our galaxy. So it's incredibly powerful. And what is clear is that the gravitational effect of the Great Attractor, which is at 1402 of Sagittarius, so this moon is very tightly conjunct the Great Attractor, it is powerful enough to bend light, So what I've noticed with people who have planets or angles around 14 degrees of Sagittarius, and again, I'd use a tight orb of about 2 degrees either way, they are able to see around corners because it bends the light. They have a strong sense of precognition and going beyond, a sense of precognition and going beyond what is. So Sagittarius in general, particularly at this solstice, I think has a sense of going beyond, whether it's just a desire to lie on a Caribbean beach right now, which is so attractive, but it's going beyond. And I think it's going beyond in our psychic sensitivities, which I've mentioned before, how much they're going to be expanded during this phase. That's highlighted by Sun square Neptune here. Psychic sensitivities expanding in a bigger way, precognition, etc., than we have ever known. And that's available for everyone. So more psychic sensitivity coming online, healing, telepathy, all the clair senses, clairaudience, clairsentience, etc. But even those perhaps we haven't known so far. And I get that feeling very, very strongly. So there is a sense of great personal transformation being initiated here. I've talked in previous videos recently about this, this finger of fate, or this finger of God, which is between Neptune and Sedna at the base. If Neptune had just dipped into 0 of Aries, which it will next year, you can see that more clearly, that sextile. And both of them, you can see that dotted green line from both of them. Those are 2 quincunxes connecting Neptune and Sedna to Haumea at 0 of Scorpio. That Yod, that finger of fate, that finger of God, is going to run all of this year and all of next year. And again, recently I've talked at length about how this really represents personal transformation, spiritual transformation, Neptune, metamorphosis for humanity, Sedna, Haumea being incredibly regenerative, anti-aging, longevity, new land masses coming up from the earth, cleansing the earth, purifying the earth, being able to summon wild food from the land and the seas, even if it had been laid waste. These are transformational principles that we're seeing in operation. And if we are staying in love and working with the energy for new earth, we are going to see that start to happen in a bigger way. It's like two entirely different timelines. And of course, there are many, many timelines, but two principal timelines operating at the same time. One based on fear, one based on love. Nobody forces you into either. It's entirely self-selecting depending on your frequency. So please be wise and conscious in your choices, Gemini. Be wise and conscious in your choices of where you're putting your focus and attention. Remember, that's your superpower. You are energetically feeding the future you want by simply paying attention to something. Again, I'm abbreviating here because I've talked so much at length about these in other videos. So what is also, I think, very interesting is that Uranus here, well, correction, I'm going to back up for a moment, actually. Neptune here is, if we look at the chart for the euro, is opposing the ascendant of the euro currency and squaring the midheaven of the euro currency this year and next year, principally up to kind of mid next year. And I'll put the details of that euro chart beneath this video so you can, astrologers can go and look at it yourselves. But that suggests some kind of dissolution around a euro currency or fragmentation, perhaps. And in addition to that, Uranus at 25 of Taurus has just passed the moon in the chart of the EU. Now, the chart for the EU, that sort of political grouping, is at 24 of Taurus in the 10th house of government, rulership for the EU. So Uranus is the planet that shakes things up, creates radical sudden change. It's just past the moon, very much in the house of rulership of the EU. And it's going to come back to 24 of Taurus, hitting that moon November and December this year, and March and April next year, and then move on. So between now and next March, April, I think we are going to see a lot of sudden radical shift and change for the EU that could also affect the EU currency, the euro. I'll put the details of the chart for the EU also below this video, so you, again, astrologers can go and check that out. So I think we're going to see, a lot because of Pluto, step changing between end of Capricorn and beginning Aquarius this year. A great deal is going to happen around governmental systems. So also to say that Uranus is very tightly conjunct a fixed star called Algol, Algol. Algol is at 26 degrees, 10 minutes of Taurus. Now, fixed stars, they're called fixed because they only move 1 degree every 72 years. So essentially, they're in the same place for roughly a lifetime. Algol doesn't have a very pretty mythology around it because it's connected to people losing their heads. Now, connected to what I was just saying, that this can be metaphorical in terms of people losing their power positions. If they're in leadership positions, they're heads of countries, they could fall from those positions. And again, Uranus is going to be hovering around that 26 degrees of Taurus this year and next year. And then it starts to, again, move on. particularly the first half again of next year. But it's also, again, sort of metaphorical for people losing their heads in terms of feeling so mentally disturbed by the speed at which things are happening. Jupiter in Gemini, things are moving so fast, and a lot of truth coming to light, a lot of shock, a lot of surprise, that they become a bit destabilized mentally. And so that's part of this picture too, and that theme is emphasized by Pluto in Aquarius, because Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, which is where we can become kind of jazzed up in our nervous system. Both Gemini, where Jupiter is, and Aquarius, where Pluto is, are both connected not only to our minds, but our nervous systems being very frazzled, very jazzed up by the speed and the information that may be coming out around this time and ongoing. And as I've mentioned before, when Pluto is moving through a sign, it not only intensifies the symbolism of that sign, so this is going to intensify the development of science and innovation and technology and AI and all the things I've spoken about, but it also can create a crisis around those things. So again, crisis in aviation, we're seeing this already, and I mentioned some detail relating to that in the last update video that you can check out, the new moon in Gemini. But it also suggests a crisis around science and technology. Are there things around science and technology that have not been for our highest good? Pluto will always reveal that which is not for our highest good. So, and that's another strong theme at this time, because I want to share something with you that I haven't spoken about before, that is very interesting. And I'm going to here talk about a centaur called Nessus. Nessus is at 19 degrees 58 minutes of Pisces. Nessus has a 125-year orbit, and the centaurs were regarded as kind of half man, half horse. They're in an area of space that orbits between largely Saturn and Pluto. Chiron is a centaur. Chariklo is a centaur. Nessus was I believe, the third centaur to be discovered. Now, centaur is the son of Ixion in myth. Nessus does not have very pretty mythology, but I think it is staggeringly relevant to where we are with this upshift in transformation that we're going to start to see. So let me describe the myth, and it's a little bit complicated, so I'm going to go through it slowly. The real expert on Nessus is the astrologer Melanie Reinhardt. I'll put her website below, because she's been the expert on Chiron, as many of you know, also on Chariklo, also on Nessus, also on another centaur called Pholos, but we're not going to talk about Pholos today. So, in the mythology, Nessus was asked by Hercules to ferry Hercules' wife, Deandira. I believe I'm pronouncing that quickly. I'll put the spelling of that below, so I might have hundreds of people writing to me asking about the spelling. I believe it's pronounced Deandira. He was asked by Hercules to ferry Deandira across a river. And, like father, like son, Nessus tried to rape Deandra, and Hercules saw what was happening. He came to his wife's rescue, and he shot and killed Nessus using a poisoned arrow. As Nessus lay dying, he gave some of his poisoned blood to Deandira, and he told her that it was actually a magical love potion, and that she could use it if she ever suspected that Hercules was being unfaithful to her. And what this magical love potion would do is to bring Hercules back to her, to be faithful again. So this mythology is very related to deception and gaslighting and poison involving the arrow and the blood. So Deandira believed Nessus, And but some of this blood was on Hercules' shirt. She put some of the blood from Nessus, who was dying, onto Hercules' shirt, her husband's shirt, when she thought he was being unfaithful, because she believed Nessus's story about this was a love potion. So she put some of the poisoned blood from Nessus onto Hercules' shirt, her husband's shirt. And he was poisoned by the blood and he died instead of coming back to her. He wasn't actually being unfaithful either. She had misread it. So there's a lot of, gaslighting, misreading, misleading. Deandra was so distraught that she'd misjudged her husband's apparent infidelity when he hadn't actually been unfaithful, and she had now inadvertently killed him by this poisoned blood. She committed suicide. So this is not a pretty myth. But it's very interesting. So it's all around, deception, blood, gaslighting, poisoning, regret. It's very interesting that Neptune, as I've spoken about many times before, also rules the blood, particularly when it's in its own sign of Pisces. It's at the anaretic degree, 29 degrees of any sign, last degree of a sign is linked to a kind of, crisis around that particular symbolism. So, we have a lot here. Now, Nessus is very tightly conjunct Saturn. And Saturn is obviously the ruler of Capricorn, where Pluto is going to retrograde to from the 2nd of September to the 19th of November. That's kind of the last gasp, if you like, of the old order. Saturn is related to governments, authority, rules and regulations, being told what to do, top-down authority. So it is remarkable, I think, at this time that Nessus is conjunct Saturn. And Melanie Reinhardt, her kind of shorthand for Nessus is the buck stops here. The buck stops here. And quoting Melanie, she says that Nessus will bring opportunities to understand and release deep patterns of helplessness, because it's connected to the abuse of power, which is fascinating. So was the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, 12th of January 2020. Remember that I've spoken about many times. So it's the release of deep patterns of helplessness and being taken advantage of, having been oppressed. Nessus activations correspond with times when things really do end, finish, and transcend to another level. And the true healing can then begin. So Nessus has the power, Melanie Reinhardt says, to blow up or shatter the much more 3D reality of Saturn. And here it is exactly by degree conjunct Saturn. I think that is incredibly interesting. And I'm sure that many of you are following my meaning here. So really, really interesting, I think. And it remains still, obviously, Nessus conjunct Saturn 2 days later, when we have the full moon in Capricorn, I'm going to be talking about in the next video. And Saturn, of course, is the ruler of that full moon because it rules Capricorn. So, boy, yeah, this is extremely powerful in terms of this upshift in the collapse of the old and the true surge into new earth energy and love being the transformer conjunct the sun here. And I'd like to just end with a quote from Cryon, channeled by the wonderful Lee Carroll, who I know many of you will be familiar with. It was just a channeling that spoke to me, and it spoke to me actually about what I'm really trying to do with my work. So in this channeling, Cryon said, at that point at which you decide to eliminate the drama and look up, Sagittarius, look up to that which we would call the connection to the other side of the veil, great attractor. This is discovering the core. And that is that you have always been and will always be in control of your life as a piece of God in the universe. We are divine fractals of the universe. So I'm going to stop sharing here. So I hope that's been helpful. Certainly something very different. And boy, am I feeling this Cancer solstice incredibly strongly. So I hope that resonated with you. I hope it made sense for you. And yeah, the frequencies of love are so strong. We feel it in our Sunday meditation. It's just that tsunami of love is coming on a storm. And remember, we always create from the invisible. So create from the invisible. It's just as easy to create something loving and amazing and beautiful as it is to create something fearful. So let us choose wisely and use our intention, our focus as wonderful transformational energy. God bless. I really hope that's helped you. Bye for now, and I'll be back very soon.